At this point, you've got your neck roughly cut out. It's got the right shape, but it takes a lot of cutting on the corners and sanding to get it rounded. But I wanted to introduce you to my board. This board has 6 different necks in different stages. So we're over here on stage 1, and stage 1, it looks exactly like this, and I'm gonna mark it and where I need to cut. Stage 2 has some cuts made. Stage 3, we're starting to sand on the spindle sander, drum sander where we just were. 4, we start shaping it a little so it's more, I don't know, it's a little more even. Stage 5 and 6 are mostly sanding, getting out those marks. So what I would like is, as you continue making and cutting and shaping this neck, come over to the board and compare which stage are you on? Which one of these are you closest to? Because I eventually want it to be closest to stage number 6, of course. But that way you can kind of self-monitor. You can look at it, compare it, and say, oh, I've still got some marks here. I still have to get this, cut so it doesn't flare as much, or make it more even, and so forth. So this will help you to continue working without coming to me every 5 minutes and saying, is this right? And I would tell you the same thing the board would. So make sure to reference this board. It's found next to my drill press in my shop. Just take your piece, put it right next to it and say, okay, I'm still at stage 4. I still see some of these marks. I still have some work to do, and continue on. First thing we're going to do is we're going to mark some drawings on the top of this. And this little template really does come in handy. It has a bunch of different circles. Now I tend to use the one directly above where it says circle template, that one. Most of them will work, but that one's about the right size. So what I do first is find the middle from here to here. You can use a tape measure or you can eyeball it, either one. That's about the center on that. On the bottom edge, I want to measure in about, I don't know, about 5/16. So if I burn an inch here, like that, maybe even 3/8. About 3/8 of an, let's go 3/8 of an inch. So there's my 1 inch at the end, and I measured in 3/8, and flip it around and do exactly the same thing. 1 inch there, measuring about 3/8, right there. So there are 3 marks, basically making a triangle. All right, so I take my circle, and I put it just on the front edge. So kind of flush with this front edge cut, so it's even with that mark that I made, and you can draw the whole circle if you want. I only need the top half, but that's fine. Now we take the edge, you can use the same gauge, from my mark here to the edge there. Okay, and draw to your 3/8 mark here. Then flip it around and do it again. Draw it there. Okay, that's the mark that I want. This is what it should look like. So you have a circle top and it flares out at the base. Okay, that'll be where your cuts go. So I don't actually need this part of the circle, that's fine. Okay, now next, we're gonna mark where those 2 3/8 lines ended up, right there and right there. Then we're going to make a line from the bottom corner to that mark right there. Okay, and then flip it around, do the same thing on the other side. There we go. And you can see I got double line, but you get the idea. So now we see that the neck flares in the back, but it also flares down as you get to the other end. So we have a lot of carving to do. So this whole area here is going to just be removed and be removed. Now, having said that, and I'll repeat this over and over again, the most important part now from here is do not cut or sand so the neck gets any narrower this way. I don't want this 2 1/4 or thereabouts to change as it tapers in. So we're not going to make it any narrower here. We're not going to sand and make it smaller here, because if it's too small, then my fretboard doesn't fit. It doesn't work. It doesn't look good. So now we're down to handwork. Now that we've got that traced, I took 2 clamps and clamped onto the headstock, way at the top, so it's hanging off the end of the table. So it's very accessible for different tools. Now I've got a couple of tools we can use, including draw knives, which work really well. We've also got a jack plane that works really well, and eventually we'll get to sanders and so forth. But we've got quite a bit of wood here to take out. So if you want to use a jack plane, that's fine. You have to have it on its side. But the most important thing, I'm going to take a pencil, is I put some pencil lines on the sides down at the bottom here. And on the other side, put a little bit of pencil and some here. What we want to do is round this off without making it much thinner. Now I've got to sand the bandsaw marks off, of course, but I don't want to make it any narrower this way. I want to be very careful as I'm cutting and here not to cut the sides at the bottom. I want to keep that nice and wide for later on. If it gets too narrow and it starts to go in and out and in and out like that, you got to make another one. So however you want to start is fine. Let's go ahead and hit it with a jack plane. And I'm just going to start cutting. You can see it's cutting off just a little bit of wood right there. And I'm taking off that corner. So I'm just going to start back and forth and back and forth. And again, I've got the lines on the back. I know you can't see them on the camera, but I don't want to cut beyond into those lines. Also, as you're cutting, you're going to start to want to go downward. And my point in that is saying, do not go down too much. If I go straight down and I cut the bottom here, this is going to rip off. This will tear out. So I want to try to cut with the grain as much as possible because it actually cuts well with the grain. This is where I'm probably going to speed up the video because there's just a lot of cutting. Now that I've got most of this shaped, obviously I have a lot more to go here. We're going to turn our attention a little bit to the neck here. This is where some of these draw knives come in handy. Now you can either push or you can pull, and it both works, but depending on the grain, one may be easier than the other. My goal with these is I'm going to round the side down to where I put pencil lines, not all the way down to the edge, but we need a nice round. So I don't want it flat like a triangle. I need it rounded.